First up tonight, the train wreck that threatens to finally, I believe, bring down the most arrogant and financially inept Premier in Australia today, Dan Andrews. It continues to reveal the desperate political spinning behind the Commonwealth Games cancellation that I must say shocked Australia this week. And the decision and then the reasons given continue to collapse under any scrutiny. As they say, it is always the cover-up that gets you. Dan Andrews made many mistakes in his twisted tale, but not apologising to the devastated athletes, their families, the people who will lose their jobs, and finally to the taxpayers of Victoria for potentially blowing up $1 billion. Well, that was Dan Andrews' biggest error. Clearly, the Premier believes he's invincible. After all, when you think about it, Victorians re-elected him for another 4-year term just 6 months ago. I still can't believe that happened. He's won 3 times now. He won after his heavy-handed handling of COVID. And you remember that. I mean, seriously, if people can vote for a bloke in a general election after being locked up 6 times, world record, only able to move 5 kilometres from your home, told that they couldn't let their children go into a playground, and police were arresting people for being out sipping alcohol out of paper cups through a straw, then you've got every reason to think, if you are Dan Andrews, that you're untouchable. But this, I think, is different. The Victorian economy, as we know, is a basket case, worst in Australia, with debt levels the same as New South Wales and Queensland put together. Interest on that debt is costing Victorian taxpayers north of $10 million a day. His recent budget increased land tax absurdly, work cover premiums by 42%, and he's pushed up payroll tax. I mean, that's a recipe for business deserting Victoria. On the Games, the Herald Sun reports today lawyers for the Commonwealth Games have already indicated compensations being chased. 200 million to 250 million is the speculation. But that's just the start. Hundreds more of $1 million have already been spent. People today reminded me that the then Victorian Governor, Linda Dessau, was in Birmingham at the closing ceremony of the last Commonwealth Games. She was there to receive the Games flag on behalf of Melbourne. There was Indigenous representation as well. VicPol, they were there to study security. Politicians were there as well. Then you have the Games organising operation. That employed over 100 people, including former COVID chief Jerome Weimar, on a 6-figure salary. But all that aside, I'm starting to get a sense, finally, that Daniel Andrews' own party, with an eye to the next election, might be starting to splinter. Dan Andrews is of the hard left. The right in Victoria has always endured him because of his success. Victorian Labor, though, is ruthless. If they feel he needs to go, they'll make it happen. Very interestingly, so-called senior Labor figures leaking to the Herald Sun today claim the notion the Games were going to blow out to cost as much as $7 billion, being the reason for dumping the Games, were, quote, a fantasy cooked up to justify the decision. Put simply, some in Labor believe the Premier, Dan Andrews, made it up. No one could have predicted a global sporting event grabbed by Victoria to maintain its hunger for major events could perhaps hasten Dan Andrews' demise. But just as debt and economic destruction cost the career of another Victorian Labor Premier, Joan Kirner, her career and trashed her reputation, history could be about to repeat, with the reign of Dictator Dan about to be over.